This is the Talkin Bout the Hoosiers podcast, presented by TheHoosier.com. We are back for another edition of the Hoosier.com postgame wrap-up, joined by Staley. I'm Drew Rosenberg. Finally, the Indiana Hoosiers ended the losing streak. It's been a while. Senior night, a lot going on. A lot of pressure, a lot of outside noise around the program. It was a, can't lose. We called the Northwestern game a can't lose too. Indiana's tournament hopes have kind of been dangling by a thread, and, they had the performance we wanted to see. Yeah, against a really bad shorthanded Minnesota team, but still it was nice to see them come out and play well for the first time in what felt like weeks.
Yeah, this was kind of the game that Indiana kind of needed right now. There's been a lot. Indiana's been, we just want to say they've been bleeding for quite a while, and tonight kind of stopped the blood a little bit. It was a shorthanded Minnesota team. I think they legit only played about 7 guys worth minutes, tonight. But Indiana did what they needed to do. They needed to take care of business. 77-47. You take that result against a team like Minnesota. Obviously, that kind of wipes away a little bit of the loss that you had to Minnesota a while ago, which that was felt like a completely different Minnesota team, a lot healthier Minnesota team back when Indiana lost to them, I think, in December. But Indiana got a lot of production from a lot of guys tonight. The first guy, obviously, you look at is Sam Alexis, 23 points, 9-11 from the field, and it was a pretty easy game plan for Indiana. It was feed Sam Alexis and get to the paint as well. And this was one of the rare occasions, throughout the season where Indiana had the front court, the paint advantage. And Indiana took advantage of that. Obviously, Lamar Wilkerson, 16 points, did really well as well for himself. Tucker DeVries, 13 points. I thought he did a really good job of just letting the game come to him. Didn't force anything, which we've seen that from Tucker, the last half of the season. He's been playing within himself a lot better. And, obviously Indiana just needed this one. It really helps them kind of build confidence from a team that had been struggling for the past 4 or 5 games. And now you get a little bit of confidence, it gets a win over a lesser team going into your final regular season matchup on the road at Ohio State, which that's looking like that's going to be a very, very big game for Indiana when it comes to their NCAA tournament hopes.
Yeah, I know we're not there yet, but it's a must-win game. Indiana, I don't see a way Indiana can make the tournament without winning the Big Ten tournament if they don't beat Ohio State on the road. The good thing is, Minnesota, I believe that it's a quad 2 win at the moment. That could change, but so Indiana does improve their record in, quad 2 versus, you want them to, you want the wins to be as good as possible, but Indiana just has not done that. And it was nice to see, a complete performance all around. Connor Enright, even how many offensive fouls did he draw in addition to his 8 assists and 5 rebounds? Just did everything for Indiana. Just a really balanced attack, but defensively, it was the Hoosiers by far their best defensive performance of the season. Without a doubt, held Minnesota to 19 points in the second half, 47 total. You don't see that in college basketball. Minnesota, I want to get the exact numbers so I don't represent it. Yeah, they scored less than 0.8 points per possession compared to Indiana, who scored 1.3. You're never going to lose a game when that happens.
No, you're not. And I think from an energetic standpoint, I think Indiana brought energy on both ends of the floor. Yeah, Minnesota in that second half was pretty bad. There's no other way to kind of put that. And I know it's kind of, you don't want to kind of beat a dead horse. Minnesota's a team that's struggling right now, and they barely have 5 guys that they can put out on the floor. But Indiana they didn't let Minnesota obviously get back into it, and we've kind of seen that from Indiana, against teams that they should put away early. This was one of the few times where I feel like Indiana, went on that kind of kill shot run in the second half to kind of put the game away, and you just kind of, wait till that final whistle, that final buzzer hits. But I think, if I can remember correctly, I think Minnesota went 8 minutes or so without a field goal. That's really impressive by Indiana to make sure that they can't get any looks, any clean looks. But, energetic standpoint, it starts with Connor Enright. You mentioned him, and kind of the head of the snake in many ways for Indiana. And, the 8 assists is really, really impressive for him. Indiana finished with only 10 turnovers, so you kind of take that. And a lot of those turnovers, came in, a very fast-paced environment. So That's what I also liked with Indiana too, is they were kind of pushing the pace when they could. Minnesota's one of the slower teams in the country, and they want to play really slow, especially when you only have seven
Yeah.
guys. You kind of are forced to play slow. You can't get your guys gas or you can't get foul trouble or anything like that. But when Indiana had their opportunity to, get the ball on the offensive end and push the pace and get out and go, they did that. And even when they were in half-court settings, they did a good job of pretty much every single possession. I felt like they found either Sam Alexis or they found Reed Bailey. Obviously, Sam Alexis had a much better game than what Reed did, but Reed came in. I thought he provided really good energy. It was also really nice to see the fans, kind of supporting him other than last game. So, and I look at, Nick Dorn. He had 11 points tonight, still struggled with his shot a little bit. He was 3 of 8 from behind the arc, and but it was good to see him get a couple shots to kind of fall there. But overall, I think it was just, when you look at it, it was senior night. The seniors are the guys that stepped up like they have all season. And Indiana just kind of rode the momentum of what Sam Alexis, Tucker DeVries, Lamar Wilkerson were kind of bringing for them tonight.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the turnovers, but the assists. So Minnesota came into this game first in the country in assist percentage. So the most of their baskets, I want to say, I'm going to get the exact number because I try not to get a scam. I'm like 72% of their buckets are assisted coming into today, and they had just 6 assists on their 17 made field goals. That was part of the biggest problem. Like Indiana swarmed them defensively. They couldn't get it into anything they wanted to. It was the performance we have wanted to see on this end of the floor all year, and it came in the second to last game of the regular season. And I think Alec lastly had a tweet talking about Sam Alexis as like this, a guy that if he was wearing an IU jersey a little longer, he'd probably go down as a fan favorite. And I couldn't agree more. I think also him being on this team where he's asked to be the guy in the front court, where if he was, on a roster with a little more depth there, maybe they could, where he's not the number one guy, or he can, play alongside another big. I think could have been even more fun, wearing the cream and crimson.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, and I've said it for a little while. Like, obviously, if Indiana had another guy or two that they could legit play in the front court, and you could put Reed Bailey in his more natural face-up position in that front court, I think this Indiana team would be a lot more balanced than what they are. Obviously, when you look at the balance of Indiana, the area that is kind of really lopsided is obviously the front court. And Coach DeVries has mentioned it too. Like, you have a lot of guys on this team have to kind of play out of position a little bit. Tucker DeVries, not really a stretch 4, but he obviously has to play that in a lot of ways. And it's just the roster construction is what it is, obviously, and we're right at the very end of the season, and Coach DeVries has done a pretty good job of obviously trying to get the most out of his guys, get the most out of this roster. So it's been a lot of lows, been a lot of highs, with the season and stuff, but when you have a game like tonight where you can kind of just beat down on your opponent a little bit and kind of get your confidence up as, the conference tournament starts coming up and you have a big road game versus Ohio State, where it feels like if you can win that game against Ohio State, you're looking pretty good when it comes to the NCAA tournament, because obviously the bubble's very, very bad again this year, which is, again, the only saving grace for Indiana. So, but by the way things look like, too, it's like, obviously we're looking kind of far ahead, but it looks like, Indiana's going to get a pretty decent draw, in the Big Ten tournament. So, obviously there's opportunities for them to go on kind of a run there and stuff. But I think tonight, obviously, if you can kind of replicate how you played against a better opponent, obviously that's going to kind of build your confidence a little bit more. And Ohio State's playing some really good basketball right now, and it's going to be a challenge for Indiana to go on the road and beat Ohio State, a team that also is desperately trying to lock themselves into the NCAA tournament as well. But hopefully, with a game like this, you can kind of build that confidence. You can go into Saturday knowing that there's a huge opportunity there. Obviously, you can get a more balanced effort, like you did tonight, against a better team.
Yeah, I think, if Indiana can get to 20 wins, I think they have a good shot at making the tournament. You mentioned it, the bubble this year, it's terrible. I mean, you look across, people like Joe Lenardi had the Hoosiers as the last team in the field as of yesterday. People are like, oh, how is that possible? And then you look at the teams they're competing against for that last spot, and it's a Auburn team that's barely above 500 and a bunch of other teams with very similar resumes that, they're not pretty. And that's the thing, Indiana shouldn't be alive right now. Most years, Indiana's tournament hopes would really be coming down to a miracle Big Ten tournament run. But if Indiana can beat Ohio State and then win a game in the Big Ten tournament, maybe two, then you're starting to think, hey, they have a good shot at dancing and maybe even avoiding that Dayton game. But Indiana still has a lot of work to do if they're going to do that.
I know we talked about Sam Alexis, being a fan favorite right now, but as I look down at the floor, Sam Alexis has the most crowd around him out of any player right now asking for autographs. So that just tells you that people really, really appreciate the effort that he's brought in. And the thing is, with Sam Alexis, and we touched on it quite a bit this season stuff, he just brought a winning mindset for this team, right? A leadership standpoint that obviously, he comes from a national championship team in Florida. He knows what a winning culture is like. And he did the best that I felt like he could this year to do what he could do in the front court, the best of his ability. And also from a leadership standpoint, obviously always bringing the energy in practice like Coach DeVries would always talk about, the players would talk about. I think when you kind of look back and you hope that, the Darren DeVries era of Indiana basketball starts to trend upward and stuff, I think you're going to look back at this team and say, yeah, they weren't the most talented team, but I think for the most part I felt like this team competed a lot this year. And they tried their best, obviously, with the lack of talent, across the board that they had. They tried to find ways to win. And I think, obviously, this is going to be a learning lesson of a season, building a better roster for Coach DeVries. But a guy like Sam Alexis, Lamar Wilkerson, obviously, Tucker DeVries, Connor Enright, those guys, you got to kind of tip your hat to them and, give them major respect for what they brought, spending their final year of college basketball here at Indiana when they didn't really have to, and the trust that they have in Coach DeVries. I think that's a really well-respected attribute of all these guys.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't say it better myself. I think, like Darren DeVries is not, he's not stupid. He knows, what he has to do moving forward. I think, no one wants to win as much as he does, and these guys do. So I think, moving forward, you understand, he's putting the right guys around him. They're adding to the staff, adding guys that can help him, fill needs and, recruit better, scout better. And you're hoping, you can build a more competitive, complete roster, to compete in the Big Ten moving forward. But year one, with this current roster, Indiana, it's been a little bit of a disappointment to some. And I think it's hard because this roster coming in, it was extremely flawed. We knew that. And it really limited, the ceiling of this team. But there were moments, throughout the year where it was like, oh, this team could do something, especially when you played a Marquette Kansas State team who at that time we didn't know how bad those two teams were going to be. You blow those teams out and you're thinking, oh, this team could be pretty good. And I think it changed the expectations early. And then Indiana met some of the tougher teams and, realized, they actually aren't there yet. But I've seen the improvement. I think that's the other thing. I know we just saw a really bad 4-game losing streak. I'm not going to, excuse that. It's been ugly. But seeing Indiana's best defensive performance of the year tonight, I mean, it was something been wanting to see from them on that end of the floor for a while.
Yeah, and last thing I'll kind of say, obviously, with this team, it's the highest of highs and lowest of lows, to this team, and that's kind of how it's been. You look at, you mentioned the Marquette Kansas State game. We didn't know at the time how bad those teams were going to be for the way that they kind of beat down a Power 5 team. That was a really good, moment, to start the Darren DeVries era. Then you meet the tougher teams and you realize you're not there yet. You lose on the road to Minnesota. You just weren't there yet. And then you kind of get on that really good run that Indiana had at the end of January, them beating Purdue. The very first time that Darren DeVries played the in-state rival Purdue. And obviously, Purdue got that win back in dominating fashion. But still, you built momentum there. You went on the road and won a double overtime win at UCLA, who has the best home record in the Big Ten, and Indiana was that one loss that they had. So, and then you get a tough, gritty performance or a gritty win over Wisconsin, who you really hope hopefully they can sneak into a quad 1 win there. But I think there's plenty to build on, from this season. It's not done yet. Obviously, we've got at least 2 more games for this Indiana season, but I think overall, I think if you just kind of peel back and you kind of disregard, and it's hard to say this, but you kind of disregard the losses that they had and stuff. You just kind of peel back and what this team was able to do, how they fought. I think you have to respect the way that these guys kind of came in this season and tried to get the Darren DeVries era off to the right start.
Yeah, I mean, it's a difficult situation for them to be in, but yeah, I mean, I don't really have anything else. I'm gonna wrap it. I mean, guys, if you haven't done so, subscribe to the Hoosier on 3. I mean, it's literally so easy. I mean, subscribe on the YouTube, guys. It's literally a click of a button. You get these post-game wraps. Get John Alden with In Touch with Indiana Sports. You get talking about the Hoosiers. Ton more shows, ton more content. You're going to get the press conferences. I think Darren DeVries is speaking right this second, if I'm not mistaken. So you're going to see that video up there in probably the next 20 minutes. So go subscribe if you haven't done so already, and subscribe to the Hoosier on 3 at thehoosier.com. Guys, the message boards are flying right now. We see the takes. We see people's thoughts on this current team, the coach, the players. We see it all.
we got high school stuff too. I'm doing a great job. I'm gonna pat myself on the back. I'm doing a great job on this. I'm not the one to pat myself on the back, but I'll do it. But
Kyler's been traveling across Indiana, going to all these top sectional games. You know, full coverage, breakdowns, some good videos. I mean, throughout the high school season too, not just the sectionals and playoffs. Like there's a ton of reporters who are, just starting now to cover the high school game and really get out there, because it's playoff time. Kyler's been there since night one. He's been covering the buzzer beaters, the crazy moments, all that all year. So
Hoosier hysteria, baby.
Yep, exactly. Thank you guys once again for tuning in to the Hoosier.com post-game wrap-up. We'll be back.